All right, let's do the 9.8 patch notes. All right, I gotta get ready. Hey guys, welcome to my 9.8 patch notes. This is the patch where MSI is going to be played on, so it has a lot of competitive innuendos, no intuitions, no competitive initiation, no competitive. Fuck, there's a word that I'm looking for. Relevance. Implications. It has a lot of competitive implications. So let's start. How do you do, fellow kids? Welcome to the MSI 2019 patch. Champions we've been seeing a lot of, like Gnar, Kayle, Nautilus, and Trundle, are getting more adjustments, but some not too commonly seen champs like Amumu and Renekton have joined them. On the items front, we are making Grievous Wounds more consistent across items that have it, and adjusting the cost of some Markman items in light of similar reductions to other category over the couple of patches. To all you Gangplank and Misfortune cosplayers, say goodbye to Butcher's Bridge, as it's okay, I don't give a fuck about that. So basically they're saying they're gonna buff the kind of underperforming champions. So I think that's what's really important, is we check out how much they buff the underperforming champions and whether they're gonna see competitive play or not. This is the MSI patch. I know I'm saying it again, but it has so much implications. So I'm surprised that Riot is making significant changes. Let's see if the changes are significant first. Amumu. Passive damage increase, Q cooldown decrease. Amumu now follows enemies hit by Q if they move while he's mid-flight. So I would say a lot of these are quality of life changes, and it will still be very hard to see Amumu. Amumu's kind of like Zac, where he has a weak early clear and he can get pushed off really easily, and he's very reliant on blue, so nice buff for Amumu solo queue players, but I don't think this is going to push Amumu into competitive play. Camille, base attack speed increase. Camille's attack speed nerf at the end of the last year slowed her camp clear in the jungle, but also left her weaker in lane. We're buffing it back up since we don't expect to make her swing too strong in either roles. So they're buffing Camille's attack speed. She still sees very, very minor play in the jungle. I remember seeing her in LCK, but I don't think it's going to push her into competitive play. I don't think she's going to see regular play in competitive, so I don't think this change matters. Ooh, Cassiopeia. With the recent increase to Q and W mana cost, we find that Cassio is having trouble staying afloat in lane and in mid-game skirmishes. Since Emax on Cassio makes for a great and aggressive playstyle anyways, we're killing two birds with one stone, helping her stay in these situations longer and keeping her kill potential high. This Cassio buff, I honestly don't think we're going to see Cassio. I thought where Cassio was really strong is when she's playing versus stuff like Lissandra mid lane. With Lissandra getting nerfed last patch, I don't think we're going to see more Lissandra. And also in combination with that, I don't think we're going to see Cassio. So I don't think this Cassio buff is that relevant either. Fiora. W damage and slow stun duration increased, E cost flattened at all ranks. We're rewarding Fiora when she successfully outplays her opponents and making it easier for her to wave clear and take towers without running out of mana and middle up taking one down. This one is actually pretty interesting. These are very minor buffs, but there's a very unique role that Fiora can play in the meta, which is the more outscaling split pusher. A lot of times in split push situations, it's more dependent on the champion, like level status, champion items, more so than dependent on the team, on who wins the 1v1 in the side lane. Like you take all the split pushers right now. Irelia, Irelia, Akali, Ryze. Who else is a split pusher that gets played? Irelia, Akali, Ryze, Jace. All these split pushers, like they win with like centimeters of difference. Like they win by 1 auto or 2 auto like in the mid game. So I think Fiora getting buffed is actually pretty huge, because Fiora wants to be the more scaling split pusher, especially into Irelia, and she's actually such a great champion to pick into Irelia to outscale her, and her getting a little bit of help I actually think is meaningful. So I think this is a very meaningful buff in the picture of competitive, and we might see Fiora at MSI, especially with all the carry players that are being sent. R cooldown decreased. So R is his ult. Gnar is very weak in lane, and he can get instigated in lane by so many of the champions right now. Jace, Irelia, Ryze. Like, I don't think Gnar is viable in competitive, so meaningless change for competitive. Jhin, E trap duration increased. Traps recharge faster at Raider ranks. R damage multiplier increased and level up tooltip corrected. So one thing that's interesting about Jhin is he's actually well suited to be picked in the meta right now due to Ashe, Varus, and Sivir, like all these utility AD carries being very popular. Jhin is also a utility AD carry. One thing that's kind of sucky about Gendo is in mid game, in the 1-3-1 situation, he's actually not that great compared to the other champions. So I'm not sure if we will see any play from Jhin. This buff is still relevant though. Jhin is one of the champions that can be seen in the meta, but I don't think he's really actually going to be seen. Okay, Kayle. This is a big one because Kayle is a core part of competitive for certain regions. So let's take our time. Base attack damage, armor, attack speed ratio decreased. Kayle ascends based on level and R rank. For a champion who's supposed to have risky and weak early game in relation to how powerful she becomes late game, Kayle is succeeding early too often. Changes to her base stats will keep her weaker early and when she ascends later compared to before. Also, shout out to Elixir of Skill and you Locodocs who saw it drop enough to use the strat. So what was happening was when Kayle took Klepto, Kayle upgrades at level 6, 11, and 16. By taking Klepto and getting Elixir of Skill, you'll be able to accelerate your spike by 1 level for each Elixir of Skill you had. So you could upgrade at level 15 instead of level 16. And they're fixing that and nerfing her early game. I think Kayle only saw play in LPL and a little bit in LCK and majorly from Europe with Fnatic. And I think this change pushes her to see even less play. So I just don't think we're going to see much Kayle in MSI. And even if he were, now we're going to see even less. Cain. E Shadow Assassin cooldown decreased. This is nice for Shadow Cain players, but I don't think we're going to see Cain in competitive, so I don't think this is meaningful. Master E is now ghosted during R. This is quality of life change. We are not going to see Master E in competitive, so that's whatever. Nautilus buff to end all Nautilus buff. We promise. So much Nautilus buff. Passive root duration increased. Q damage increased. How do I feel about this? Nautilus buff. I know we saw some Nautilus in the LCK promos, and we might see more Nautilus, but champions like Nautilus force the team into playing more teamfight, especially when you pick him as a top laner. So I actually don't think we're going to see that much Nautilus, and I do think tanks have to be so strong to see competitive play right now, because these champions like Ryze, Jace, who else am I thinking of? Ryze, Jace, Irelia, they actually split push incredibly well, and they're effective in team fights, and they're such a big pressure point for teams. And a lot of the teams going to MSI are 1-3-1 teams, so they are not going to have a preference for tanks. So I think there needs to be a lot more buff to not just tanks, also items that can help tanks beat solo laners. I know someone says something about Bramble Best being in this patch, so we're going to check that out. But just reading the Nautilus buff, I don't think this is going to like push him over the edge where we're like, Nautilus side lane, Nautilus first pick, let's do it. I still think the carries are way too strong. Alright, Oran, let's see. So, to go back a little bit on what we need to see Nautilus and tanks played, we're going to need to see the top lane carry somewhat nerfed, that's one thing. And we also need to see the jungle carries buffed. Like, that's when top lane tanks are most viable, when tanks are strong and carries are weak in top lane, and when carries are strong in jungle. So like Nautilus Rek'Sai, that's a good combo. Nautilus Kindred, that's a good combo. But I think Kindred, like, so we might see a comp like Nautilus, Kindred, Zillion. Like, that's a comp I can see happening. But that's a very specific comp that relies on Kindred, Zillion as a core, and Nautilus being good with it. So apparently people in chat are saying AP Nautilus mid is good. I'm not too familiar with AP Nautilus, so I won't comment on that. Let's go to Oran. So they buffed the upgraded items. Living Forge, the Sunfire Cape upgrade, Frozen Fist upgrade, and what the fuck is Infernal Mask? Infernal Mask is probably upgraded version of Abyssal Mask. So, I mean, Oran is the one tank that is still seeing play in competitive, so these buffs to Oran is nice. Renekton. Ooh, Renekton buffs. Actually pretty interesting, because people do play Renekton sometimes into stuff like Irelia. Base health, attack speed growth, and armor growth rounded up. Q healing versus champions increased. Ooh, this is spicy. Ooh. Renekton into Irelia is a common matchup that we might see again. And LPL teams in general like Renekton, so this does have competitive bearings. We might see more Renekton at MSI. Sejuani, W damage ratio increase. I don't think jungle Seju currently is being played, and if she does get played, it's very specific, usually only with Irelia and Jace, so very, very little competitive bearings, and I don't think it's going to matter that much. Finch, base health regen increased, W slow increased, E cost decreased. I personally don't like it when we see Finch in competitive, so I hope we don't see Finch. And also, nerf to Dark Seal has weakened Finch, so I don't think this has competitive bearings. Trundle, Q bonus damage increased late, R cooldown decreased. I don't think we're going to see Trundle. Trundle is really good when people are running a lot of tanks and a lot of very tanky tanks, and that's not the current meta, so I don't think we're going to see a lot of Trundle. Zed, Q damage decreased, W cooldown increased. Wait, that's a nerf. Why are you guys nerfing my baby? Zed saw some competitive play as a counter pick, and he's getting a little bit of nerf. I don't think these nerfs are really big enough to kill Zed. Whoa. Why are you guys nerfing Cutlass? So they're increasing Cutlass cost by 100. Why? Where is it being used so much for it needs a nerf? I guess a lot of champions are using it, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad. We first decreased the price in cost-cutting sale across the board following a noticeable increase in price of marksman items. Wait! There's so many people that use Cutlass beyond marksman. This doesn't just affect marksman. But the discount price since then has made the item too valuable for marksman. What? There's other users. I love Cutlass as an item, and I think Cutlass opens up playmaking for AD carries, which is something very rare for AD carries to be able to do. And for them to like playmaking on AD carry is super, super rare. And this nerfs that part. I don't like this change. Pega. So Gunblade has their combined cost decrease, so Gunblade is fine. So we're probably going to see more cannons. I guess we're not going to see more cannons going Gunblade, because Cannon was going between Gunblade and Proto, but Israel's will definitely like the Gunblade a little bit more. It's 100 gold decrease. I'm no expert, but is 100 gold really that much? It is pretty big on a first buy item. Like 100 gold on an item you're supposed to get in your first back is pretty significant. Bramble Best, Grievous Wounds durations increased. Okay. This kind of counteracts the Fiora buff that we were talking about. I mean, they buffed Cinderhawk, but they didn't actually buff Cinderhawk. They just added the tooltip, so it's actually getting buffed. That's nice. We might see more tanks in jungle, but if you see tanks in jungle, that means you see more carries top. Storm Rager. Energize effects increase and slow decay over a longer period of time. Right now, the only champion who's really buying Storm Rager is Kai'Sa. Yeah, it's mainly due to the stat profile, not because of the Energize passive. You get it so you can get your upgrades. Nice buff to Storm Rager, but I still don't think we're going to see it. Grievous buff. Grievous wound buff on Thornmail also. Okay. Coup de Grace. So instead of doing 7% bonus damage, it does 8% bonus damage. This is so minor. And then ARAM stuff. Okay, so the big question is, on 9.8, are we going to see more tanks or not? That is like the biggest question to ask. I actually don't think we're going to see that much tanks, because the current jungle pool won't change that much. And the current carry pool from top didn't get touched at all. So I actually think meta is going to stay pretty similar for 9.8. We might see Fiora, we might see Renekton, and we might see Nautilus. But this doesn't open up like this world of tanks where like it's not like we're going to see like Maokai Shen, Nautilus, Oran only. We're definitely going to see a lot more carries. So yeah, I don't think we're going to see more carries. Or I don't think we're going to see more tanks, and the meta is going to stay pretty stable with maybe one champion being added in and one champion being like, we're going to see a little bit of change in champion pool, but I don't think there's going to be a significant overarching change where we're like, this is the world of tanks now.